At Thanksgiving, my mom said, "Your sister just bought a beautiful house. When will you finally settle down?" I replied, "Oh, I already did. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me." Her face turned red as everyone turned to stare. Growing up as the second daughter in the Patterson family meant living in Madison's shadow. My older sister was everything my mother wanted: cheerleader, captain, homecoming queen, married at 23 to a pharmaceutical sales rep named Brad, who wore polo shirts and drove a leased BMW. They had a golden retriever named Cooper and a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood where everyone mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings. She was 32 now, nearly 9 years into her picture-perfect marriage. I was the weird one, the one who spent weekends at art galleries instead of brunch spots, the one who studied architecture instead of something practical like nursing or education. My mother never understood why I couldn't just be more like Madison. Every family gathering became a comparison exercise, a subtle reminder that I was falling short of some invisible standard I'd never agreed to meet. Thanksgiving 2023 started like every other holiday. I pulled into my parents' driveway in Philadelphia at exactly 2:00 in the afternoon, already bracing myself for what was coming. Madison's Mercedes SUV sat gleaming in the driveway, positioned perfectly, as if even her vehicle needed to make a statement. I grabbed the pumpkin pie I picked up from the bakery and headed inside. "Julie, you made it." My dad, Robert, was the only one who greeted me with genuine warmth. He hugged me tight, and I caught a whiff of his Old Spice cologne mixed with a turkey roasting in the kitchen. "Wouldn't miss it, Dad. Your sister's in the living room. She has some exciting news." The way he said it told me he'd already heard the speech multiple times. I found Madison holding court on the sectional sofa, her blonde highlights catching the light from the crystal chandelier Mom insisted on keeping lit year-round. Brad sat beside her, nodding along like a dashboard bobblehead. My Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, and my grandmother were arranged around them like an audience at a theater production. "Julie," Madison squealed, using the childhood nickname I'd asked her to stop using when I was 12. "Come see the pictures." She thrust her phone in my face before I could even set down my purse. Image after image of a sprawling house with white columns and a circular driveway scrolled past. It looked exactly like every other house in her neighborhood, which I suppose was the point. 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and a kitchen with marble countertops, she announced to the room. "We close next month." "It's gorgeous, honey." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel embroidered with autumn leaves. She kissed Madison's cheek, then glanced at me with that expression I knew too well: disappointment wrapped in concern, wrapped in judgment. Dinner was the usual affair. 20 minutes of my dad asking about everyone's jobs, followed by 2 hours of my mother steering every conversation back to Madison's accomplishments. The new house dominated the discussion. Madison described every room in excruciating detail, while Brad threw in comments about property values and mortgage rates. I pushed green beans around my plate and counted the minutes until I could reasonably leave. Then my mother dropped the bomb I should have seen coming. "Your sister just bought a beautiful house." She gestured at Madison with her wine glass, her third of the evening. "When will you finally settle down, Julie?" The table went quiet. Even my grandmother stopped chewing. I felt every eye land on me, waiting for my usual deflection. Normally, I'd mumble something about focusing on my career or not having met the right person yet. I'd make myself small and let the conversation move on to safer topics. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the wine I'd been drinking to get through the evening. Maybe it was the 28 years of being the disappointing daughter finally reaching their breaking point. Maybe I was just tired of pretending their approval mattered. "Oh, I already did settle down." The words came out calm and clear. "I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me." My mother's face flushed crimson, starting at her neck and spreading upward like spilled wine on a white tablecloth. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madison's fork clattered against her plate. "Excuse me?" My mother's voice was ice. "You heard me." I took a sip of water, surprised by my own steadiness. "I got married 7 months ago. Bought a house, too. I just didn't see the point in inviting people who spent my entire life making me feel like I'm not good enough." The explosion I expected didn't come immediately. Instead, there was stunned silence. My father looked at me with wide eyes. Aunt Carol's mouth hung open. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. "You're lying." Madison spoke first, her voice sharp. "There's no way you got married without telling anyone." "Why would I lie?" I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. Here's the courthouse ceremony. That's my husband, James. He's a structural engineer. We got married in April. I passed the phone to my father. In the photo, I wore a simple cream dress while standing next to a tall man with kind eyes and dark curly hair. We were on the courthouse steps, both grinning like idiots, the spring sunshine making everything look golden and possible. You look beautiful, my dad whispered, his eyes fixed on the image. And the house? My mother had found her voice again, though it shook slightly. I swiped to another photo. Our Victorian townhouse in Pittsburgh's Lawrenceville neighborhood stared back from the screen. 3 stories of red brick with original stained glass windows, and a turret that had sold me the moment I saw it. James and I had bought it a year ago and spent 5 months renovating it, stripping wallpaper and refinishing hardwood floors until our backs ached and our bank account whimpered. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, original 1890s architecture. We put down 70%. That last part wasn't entirely true. It was closer to 60%, but I wanted to see my mother's face when I said it. How did you... She couldn't finish the question. I've been working, saving, living below my means, while everyone assumed I was struggling. I took my phone back from my father. James and I met 3 years ago at a renovation workshop. We've been building a life together, while you were all too busy comparing me to Madison to notice. Why wouldn't you tell us? My grandmother spoke for the first time, her voice small and hurt. That question landed differently. My grandmother had never been cruel, just complicit in the family dynamics. I softened slightly. Grandma, every time I came home, someone had a comment. My clothes were too artistic, my apartment was too small, my job didn't make enough money, my boyfriends weren't serious enough. I looked around the table. I got tired of defending my life to people who had already decided I was failing at it. We never said you were failing, my mother protested. You didn't have to say it directly. I picked up my wine glass, then set it down again. It was in every comparison to Madison, every helpful suggestion about my career, every conversation about when I'd finally get serious about life, as if I wasn't already serious, just not in the way you approved of. Madison stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're making us out to be villains because you decided to be secretive and dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I was protecting my happiness. I stood too, grabbing my purse from the back of my chair. James asked me early on if we should have a big wedding, include the family, do the traditional thing. I told him I wanted our marriage to start in joy, not in judgment. So we went to the courthouse with his parents and his sister, and it was perfect. His family was there. My mother's voice cracked on the last word. They were excited for us. They didn't spend the whole time asking when we'd do something more impressive or why we couldn't be more like James' successful brother. They were just happy. I headed toward the door. That's the difference. My father followed me into the hallway. Julie, wait. I turned, already feeling the adrenaline starting to fade and the guilt creeping in. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I should have said that more. I should have stood up for you more. My throat tightened. Thanks, Dad. Can I meet him? James, see the house? Yeah. I blinked back tears. I'd like that. He hugged me again, longer this time. I'm sorry your mother made you feel like you had to hide the best things in your life. I drove back to Pittsburgh in a daze, calling James from the car to tell him what happened. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the 1,000 reasons I loved him. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. Terrified, relieved, guilty, free, all of it at once. You want me to make hot chocolate when you get home? Yes, please. The drive gave me time to replay the entire evening in my head. I kept seeing my mother's face, the way the color had drained and then flooded back. Part of me felt victorious. Another part felt like I just detonated a bomb in the middle of my family and walked away from the wreckage. The thing nobody tells you about standing up for yourself is that it doesn't feel clean. It doesn't feel like those moments in movies where the protagonist delivers the perfect comeback and walks away in slow motion while triumphant music plays. It feels messy and complicated and like maybe you're the villain in someone else's story. I thought about all the years leading up to this moment, the accumulation of small cuts that eventually became too much to bear. There was my college graduation where my mother spent the entire lunch talking about Madison's promotion at the dental office where she worked as a hygienist. I just earned my architecture degree with honors, had been selected for a competitive internship at a prestigious firm in Pittsburgh, and my mother asked me exactly 2 questions about it before pivoting back to Madison's ability to upsell patients on whitening treatments. There was the time I'd brought my ex-boyfriend David home for Easter. He was a sculptor, thoughtful and kind, with calloused hands and paint permanently under his fingernails. My mother took one look at him and asked what his real job was. When I explained that art was his real job, she'd smiled tightly and said, "How creative." The word dripped with condescension. David and I broke up 3 months later, not because of my family, but their reaction hadn't helped. There was my 25th birthday dinner where Madison announced her engagement to Brad. The entire evening became about her ring, her venue options, her color schemes. Nobody even sang happy birthday. My cake sat forgotten on the counter while everyone clustered around Madison's phone looking at Pinterest boards. Each incident alone was survivable, forgettable even, but together they formed a pattern that taught me my accomplishments would always come second to Madison's conventional life choices. The house was warm when I walked in, string lights twinkling in the windows, and jazz playing softly from the kitchen. James wrapped me in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and safety. "You did good," he murmured into my hair. I might have just blown up my family. Maybe they needed blowing up. He led me to the couch and handed me the hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon, exactly how I liked it. He didn't push me to make decisions or respond to anyone. He just stayed close. "Tell me everything," James said, settling beside me. "Don't leave anything out." So I did. I described the whole evening in detail, including the parts I'd glossed over on the phone. How Madison had been showing off pictures of her house before I'd even taken off my coat. How my mother had refilled her wine glass 3 times before dinner was served. How Aunt Carol had made a comment about my bohemian lifestyle when she saw my vintage dress and chunky jewelry. "And then your mom asked the question," James prompted. She didn't just ask. She announced it like she was presenting evidence to a jury. I took a sip of hot chocolate. "Your sister just bought a beautiful house. When will you finally settle down?" With this emphasis on finally, like I'm 45 and living in my parents' basement instead of 28 with a career I love. "What did Madison do after you told them?" She accused me of lying, said there was no way I'd gotten married without telling anyone. I laughed, but it sounded bitter, like it was so impossible that someone would want to marry me without her knowing about it first. James's jaw tightened. He'd heard plenty of stories about my family over the 3 years we'd been together, but he'd never witnessed it firsthand. I'd always kept him separate, protected him from it. Maybe I'd been protecting myself too, keeping my happiness quarantined from their ability to poison it. "I wish I could have seen their faces when you showed them the photos," he said. My dad looked sad, hurt, but sad, like he realized he'd missed something important. I scratched behind Fitzgerald's ears. Everyone else just looked shocked, offended almost. How dare I have a whole life they didn't know about? You have every right to privacy. I know, but I still feel guilty. Is that crazy? It's not crazy. It's human. He pulled me closer. They conditioned you to feel responsible for their feelings, to make yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. Guilt is the tool they use to keep you in line. I let that sink in. James had done his own therapy before we met, worked through his issues with his father who'd been demanding and critical. He recognized the patterns in my family because he'd lived through similar ones. When I'd started seeing Dr. Reeves 2 years into our relationship, he'd been nothing but supportive. "My therapist is going to have a field day with this," I muttered. "I've been seeing Dr. Reeves for 2 years, working through the complex tangle of wanting my family's approval while knowing it came with impossible conditions. She'd been encouraging me to set boundaries. I don't think she'd expected me to set them with a grenade." We stayed on the couch for hours, talking through everything. James asked good questions. He didn't try to fix anything or tell me what to do next. He just listened and validated and made sure I knew I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt by people who claimed to love me. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "Whatever you want. You're in control of this story now, not them." That idea felt foreign and thrilling and terrifying all at once. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through them. My mother had left 6 voicemails. I listened to them while making coffee, James hovering nearby like a concerned guardian. The first one was angry. "Julie Christine Patterson, you call me back right now. I cannot believe you embarrassed me like that in front of the entire family. What were you thinking?" The second was tearful. "How could you get married without me? I'm your mother. I had a right to be there. You've broken my heart. The third was accusatory. Your father says I need to understand your perspective, but I don't understand anything except that you're selfish. You've always been selfish, thinking you're too good for this family. The fourth was bargaining. If you're really married, we should have a proper reception. We can still celebrate. Call me back and we'll plan something nice. The fifth was back to angry. I raised you better than this. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me, by sneaking around and making me look like a fool? The sixth was resigned. I don't know what I did to make you hate me so much. I tried my best with you, Julie. I really did. Each message felt like a punch to the gut. Not because she was right, but because she was using every manipulation tactic in the book, and part of me still wanted to give in, to call her back and apologize and make everything okay again. Don't respond yet, James said, reading my face. Give yourself time to think. She's my mother, and you're allowed to take a breath before you engage with her. The texts were worse. Madison had sent a dozen messages that escalated from confused to angry to mean. Did you really get married, or was that just a lie to make yourself feel important? Mom is crying. Are you happy now? You always had to make everything about you. I can't believe you ruined Thanksgiving like this. It was supposed to be about celebrating my house. Brad says you're toxic. He's probably right. Why do you hate us so much? Aunt Carol had texted, your mother is devastated. Family is supposed to support each other, not tear each other down. Very disappointed in you. My cousin Rachel, Madison's age and similarly conventional, wrote, wow, seeking much? This is low even for you. But there were other messages too. My father had texted around midnight. I know you're probably upset. I don't blame you. Your mother and I are going to talk. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I love you, kiddo. Sleep well. That one made me cry into my coffee. My grandmother had texted early in the morning. Congratulations on your marriage, sweetheart. I'd love to meet your husband when you're ready. No pressure, just love. And surprisingly, my cousin Derek. Dude, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. Madison has been insufferable about that house for months. You're my hero. I showed James all the messages. He read them carefully, his expression darkening with each swipe. This is abuse, he said quietly. You know that, right? This isn't normal family conflict. This is punishment for not playing your assigned role. I spent the weekend in a fog, alternating between righteous anger and crippling guilt. James kept me grounded, reminding me to eat and sleep and not doom scroll through my phone. We watched movies and took walks through our neighborhood, looking at the November leaves scattered across the brick streets. He didn't push me to make decisions or respond to anyone. He just stayed close. On Sunday evening, I finally called Dr. Reeves. She had an emergency appointment available on Monday morning. Tell me what happened, she said, settling into her chair with her notebook. I recounted the whole story. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes. How do you feel about what you did? She asked when I finished. Honestly, I feel like I finally told the truth, and everyone's mad at me for it. Are they mad about the truth, or mad about losing control over the narrative? I sat with that question. They're mad I didn't ask permission. Permission to what? To be happy, to get married, to buy a house, to succeed without them validating it first. The words tumbled out faster. They're mad I didn't give them the chance to approve or disapprove, to make it about them somehow. And what does that tell you? That they never really cared about my happiness. They cared about their ability to shape it. Dr. Reeves smiled softly. That's significant insight, Julie. We spent the rest of the session talking about boundaries. She helped me draft responses to my family that were honest without being cruel, firm without being aggressive. She reminded me that I could love people and still protect myself from them. You're not responsible for managing their emotions, she said as our time ended. You're only responsible for being truthful and respectful. They're responsible for how they react to that truth. I left her office feeling clearer, more centered, ready to face whatever came next. That evening, I finally responded to my father's text. Thanks, Dad. I'd love for you to meet James and see the house. How about next Saturday? He replied within minutes. That would be wonderful. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. I didn't respond to my mother's voicemails yet. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, I sent her a text. I need some space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. I love you, but I need time. She didn't respond, which somehow felt worse than if she'd sent another angry message. Madison's text went unanswered. She was an adult having a tantrum because someone else had gotten attention, and I wasn't going to reward that behavior. To my grandmother, I wrote, "Thank you for your kindness. It means more than you know. I'll call you this week and we can arrange a visit. Work on Monday was a relief. I lost myself in blueprints and client meetings, grateful for problems that had clear solutions. My colleague Sarah noticed I was distracted during lunch. You okay? You seem off. I'd never told anyone at work much about my family. I kept those worlds separate, afraid that if my coworkers knew how dysfunctional my personal life was, they'd think less of me professionally. But Sarah was a friend, not just a colleague, and I was tired of hiding. I told my family I got married 6 months ago at Thanksgiving dinner. They didn't know. Sarah's eyes went wide. Oh my God, why didn't they know? Because they've spent my entire life making me feel like nothing I do is good enough. I didn't want them ruining my wedding day. Holy! She leaned back in her chair. How did they react? About like you'd expect. Anger, guilt-tripping, accusations. The usual family dysfunction. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. She hesitated, then added, but also, good for you. That took guts. Her support surprised me. I'd expected judgment, or at least confusion. Instead, she got it. My family's similar, she admitted. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Sometimes you have to save yourself from the people who are supposed to save you. That conversation helped more than she probably knew. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that other people understood family complications and didn't think I was a terrible person for protecting myself. Saturday came faster than I expected. James and I spent Friday evening cleaning the house, even though it was already clean. Nervous energy made us rearrange furniture and fluff pillows and debate whether the good wine glasses or the everyday ones sent the right message. He's your dad, James reminded me, not a hostile foreign diplomat. I know, but this matters. Him seeing our life, understanding why I did what I did. He will. Your dad's a good guy. He just needs to see what he's been missing. My father arrived at noon carrying a bottle of wine and a wooden cutting board he'd made in his workshop. His eyes were uncertain as I opened the door, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. Dad, I hugged him tight. Come in. James appeared behind me, extending his hand. Mr. Patterson, great to finally meet you. Please, call me Robert. My dad shook his hand, then surprised James with a hug. Thank you for making my daughter happy. I can see it in her face. We gave him the full tour, explaining each room and the work we'd done. My father ran his hands over the exposed brick in the living room, examined the original crown molding, admired the way we preserved the historical elements while modernizing the functionality. This is incredible, he said in the kitchen, looking at the butcher block counters James had installed. You did all this yourselves? Most of it, James confirmed. We hired out the electrical and plumbing, but the rest was us. Julie, this is exactly the kind of house you used to draw when you were little. My father's voice was thick with emotion. Remember? You'd sketch Victorian houses with turrets and stained glass windows. You wanted to live in a fairy tale. I'd forgotten about those drawings, but he was right. This house was a grown-up version of those childhood dreams. We ate lunch at the dining room table, sun streaming through the bay windows. My father asked James about his work, his family, how we met. He listened to the answers with genuine interest, not the polite but distracted attention my mother usually gave to anything that didn't directly concern her. I owe you an apology, my father said after we'd finished eating. I let your mother's favoritism go on for too long. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that you were strong enough to handle it, but that wasn't fair to you. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He looked at me directly. You're my daughter. I should have stood up for you more. I should have made sure you knew I was proud of you, even when your mother was too focused on Madison to notice. I failed you, and I'm sorry. Tears burned my eyes. I never thought you saw it. I saw it. I just didn't know how to fix it without making everything worse. Your mother and Madison have a bond I never quite understood. I kept hoping she'd eventually see you the way I do, but she was too caught up in her own expectations. James excused himself to give us privacy, disappearing into the kitchen with the dishes. I'm proud of you, my father continued, not just for the house or the marriage or the career, for having the courage to build the life you wanted instead of the life we expected. That takes more strength than people realize. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I know, but sometimes growth hurts. Sometimes boundaries hurt. That doesn't mean they're wrong. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your mother will come around eventually. She's stubborn, but she's not stupid. She'll realize what she's losing if she doesn't change. And if she doesn't, then you'll have the life you built anyway. And that will have to be enough. We moved to the living room where James rejoined us with coffee. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, sports, books, the neighborhood. My father fit into our home naturally, laughing at James's jokes and asking thoughtful questions about our renovation plans. When he left that evening, he hugged me long and hard. "Don't shut me out," he said. "I know I don't deserve full access after being complicit for so long, but I want to do better. Let me try." "Okay, Dad, we can try." I watched him drive away, James's arm around my shoulders. "That went well," James observed. "Yeah, it did. One relationship repaired. Several more still broken, but it's a start." Over the next few days, my phone became a battlefield. My mother left voicemails that swung between angry and tearful. Madison sent texts calling me selfish and attention-seeking. Aunt Carol somehow got my email and sent a long message about family loyalty. But there were other messages, too. My father sent pictures of his workshop, asking if James would want to help him build a bookshelf. My grandmother called to say she understood more than I thought and asked if I'd send her our address so she could mail a wedding gift. My cousin Derek, who I barely knew, sent a message saying he'd always felt like a black sheep too, and good for me for standing up for myself. James's family invited us for dinner, and his mother, Patricia, hugged me extra tight. "Your father called me," she admitted, smiling softly. "Asked if we'd really been at the wedding. I told him it was beautiful, and his daughter is lovely." "He called you?" I asked, surprised. "Said he wanted to understand what he'd missed." She squeezed my hand. "Give them time. Not everyone deserves it, but some people can grow if you let them." 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my mother showed up at our house. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me," James murmured, disappearing behind the doorway. I opened the door before she could knock. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked into our entry hall, taking in the exposed brick and vintage light fixtures. I watched her eyes travel up the stairs to the stained glass window on the landing, the afternoon sun painting colored patterns across the original hardwood. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "Thank you. I'm not good at this." She twisted her purse strap between her fingers. "At apologizing. At admitting I was wrong." I didn't make it easier for her. I just waited. "I compared you to your sister because Madison's life made sense to me. I understood it. You were always so different, so creative, so sure of your own path. It scared me." She sat down on our stairs without being invited, suddenly looking older than I remembered. "I thought if I pushed you toward conventional success, you'd be safer, happier. But I wasn't Madison. I never would be." "I know that now." She looked up at me, and I saw genuine regret in her eyes. "Your father told me something after you left. He said you'd been trying to tell us about your life, about the things that made you happy, and we kept changing the subject back to Madison. I didn't believe him at first, but then I thought back through the last few years, and he was right." I sat down next to her on the stairs. "I stopped trying to share things with you because every time I did, you found something wrong with it." "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Julie. You deserve better than that. You deserved a mother who celebrated who you actually are, not who I wanted you to be." We sat in silence for a while. I could hear James in the kitchen, giving us privacy, but staying close enough in case I needed him. "I'd like to meet James," my mother said finally, "if you'll let me, and I'd like to see the rest of the house, hear about your work, actually listen this time." "Okay." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something, a crack in the wall between us. James came out of the kitchen with 3 mugs of coffee and a plate of the lemon cookies I'd baked the night before. He shook my mother's hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Patterson. Julie's told me a lot about you." My mother laughed, a real laugh that made her sound younger. "I'm sure she has, and I'm sure I deserved all of it." We gave her a tour of the house. I showed her the third-floor studio where I worked on architectural drawings, and James kept his engineering models. She asked questions that were actually questions, not judgments disguised as curiosity. "What was it like working on historic renovations? How did you decide on this neighborhood? What are your plans for the backyard?" By the time she left 2 hours later, something had shifted. She hugged me at the door, holding on longer than usual. "I want to do better," she said. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I want to try." That's all I'm asking for. Christmas was still awkward. Madison barely spoke to me, clearly hurt that I'd stolen her thunder and made her new house seem less impressive by comparison. But my father helped James install new shelving in the basement, and my mother complimented my dress without suggesting I'd look better in something more like what Madison was wearing. Baby steps. The real shift came in March, 8 months after the Thanksgiving explosion. Madison showed up at our house on a Saturday morning, alone. I almost didn't answer the door. "I was a jerk," she said as soon as I opened it. At Thanksgiving, and for years before that, I was a complete jerk, and I'm sorry. I was so shocked I forgot to invite her in. We stood in the doorway while she continued, her eyes red but steady. Brad and I have been going to couples counseling. Things aren't great between us, and the therapist asked us to think about patterns we learned from our family. I realized I've been competing with you our whole lives because Mom made everything a competition. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You were braver than me. You built a life you actually wanted instead of performing for everyone else. I resented you for it, Julie. Maddie. I hadn't called her that since we were kids. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know I'm working on it, on being less of a narcissist. She laughed weakly, but it sounded sad. Can I see your house? Like, actually see it, not just judge it? I nodded. I showed my sister my home, my life, the world I'd built without her approval. She cried when she saw the studio, looking at my drawings scattered across the drafting table. You're so talented, she whispered. I don't think I ever told you that. No. No, you didn't. I'm telling you now. Things didn't magically become perfect. My mother still occasionally made comparisons before catching herself. Madison and I had to learn how to be sisters again, finding common ground beyond our mother's expectations. Family dinners remained somewhat tense, everyone tiptoeing around old wounds. But James and I hosted Thanksgiving the following year, in our house, with our rules. My father and James cooked the turkey together, arguing good-naturedly about brining times. My mother brought flowers and complimented the table settings without suggesting how they could be improved. Madison showed up with Brad and announced they were separating. And instead of making it dramatic, we just supported her. My grandmother cornered me in the kitchen while I was mashing potatoes. You did the right thing, she said, reaching up to pat my cheek with her soft, wrinkled hand. Sometimes people need to be shocked into seeing what they've been missing. Your mother needed that. I didn't do it to shock anyone. I did it because I was tired. I know, sweetheart. That's what made it so powerful. That night, after everyone left and James and I were cleaning up, he asked me if I regretted how I'd handled things the year before. I thought about it while washing wine glasses, watching the soap bubbles catch the kitchen light. No, I said finally. I spent too many years trying to be enough for people who decided I wasn't. I'm not doing that anymore. He kissed my temple. Good. We finished the dishes in comfortable silence, and I thought about the younger version of myself who'd sat at that Thanksgiving table feeling small and wrong. I wished I could tell her that one day she'd have this, a home she loved, a partner who celebrated her, family members who were learning to do better, and most importantly, peace with her own choices. The truth is, I didn't settle down in the way my mother meant. I didn't conform or compromise or make myself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of success. I built something authentic, something mine, something worth protecting from people who couldn't see its value. And when they finally turned to stare, when my mother's face turned red and the table went silent, I wasn't performing or proving anything. I was just done pretending that their doubt mattered more than my joy. That was the real settling down, the moment I chose myself over their approval. Everything good that came after started from that decision, that single moment of refusing to apologize for my happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Thank you for hosting. The house was beautiful. You were beautiful. Love you, kiddo. I showed James, and he smiled. See, people can change. Some people, I corrected, the ones willing to do the work. Fair enough. We turned off the lights and headed upstairs, passing the framed photo from our courthouse wedding hanging in the hallway. That version of me smiled out from the frame, radiant, with a secret joy she'd kept safe from judgment until she was ready to share it. I smiled back at her, at myself, at the choice I'd made to protect what mattered most. Some people think revenge is about making others hurt the way they hurt you, but my revenge was quieter than that. It was building a beautiful life and refusing to let anyone minimize it. It was finding people who loved me as I was, not as they wanted me to be. It was looking my mother in the eye and calmly stating that I'd already achieved everything she claimed I was failing at, just without her permission or presence. The best revenge was my happiness, fully realized and unapologetic. And I was never giving that up.